time.
Yes. So first of all, thank you, Gianni. This was really a very good presentation because it was a summarization of everything, and it was very helpful, I think, to have such a kind of summarization of bioacoustics, ecoacoustics, how they are connected, and I'm sorry you cannot discuss right now. And I propose, since we are about 20 minutes late, I propose to say no. It was a pleasure to be following your presentation, and so it wasn't actually alarming because it was such a pleasure to do that. But so I propose, why don't we shift the entire first part of the morning program of 20 minutes? So we had to start at 9:20 and we start at 9:40. So let's consider that every presentation of the 4 presentations before the coffee break will be delayed of 20 minutes. And then we'll do just a 10 minutes coffee break, and then we'll start in time again. If you agree, we can do like that. And everybody is connected knows that presentations, the 4 presentations of the first part of the morning will be delayed of 20 minutes. Okay. So let's, without losing any time more, let's start with Girola Elisa, who is, I don't know if Girola is connected already.
Yes, I'm here. I'm just starting my video.
She's presenting a talk on singing in a noisy ocean. Can male humpback whales cope with natural and anthropogenic noise? So I leave you the words, Girola, so we are right in time with the 20 minutes delay.
Perfect, thank you.
Don't forget to, I tell you to everybody on this session, don't forget when you share your screen to share the sound and share high quality sound. Because even yesterday we had terrific presentations, but the sound was actually not arriving because the sound of the speakers of your computer is not then passed from Zoom if you don't check the sound, the share sound button and the high quality sound as well. Just a recommendation to everybody to be able to share your sound examples in the best way. Otherwise, people do not do that. If you need, just a second, Girola, if you need, and I'm talking to the presenters of this morning session, all the others as well, if you need to recall how to share high quality sound, there is a vademecum that we sent in one of our emails at the start of the conference. Okay, it's very simple, but it's tricky because you have to find where to check sound and high quality stereo sound. Let's
Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Perfect. I do hope I did share the sound correctly, but please do let me know throughout the presentation if something is not working. And
if you have sound examples, what I suggest is just if you have some examples which are important, I just suggest to reshare your screen. So stop sharing and share your screen. If you...
Perfect. Yes. Do let me know if they don't work.
Okay. Perfect.
So thank you. And I'll just introduce my lab very briefly. I work for the Cetacean Ecology and Acoustic Lab at the University of Queensland. And we focus mainly on dolphins and whale acoustic communication. And we work mainly on the east coast of Australia, especially off the coast of Queensland. These are shallow coastal waters in tropical and subtropical region. And these are also very busy waters in terms of anthropogenic activity. And on the map on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the main ports in the Great Barrier Reef region, which is in the northern part of our study area. And the black lines represent the major shipping lanes in this region. And they then continue further south into the major ports of Brisbane and Sydney. So the dolphin and whales that live in this area, they have to deal with a soundscape that is characterized by both natural and anthropogenic sources. So this plot here shows the main natural noise in our study area. What we can see is one major peak and then a smaller minor peak. And these peaks are more clearly identifiable in the 10th and 25th percentiles and then tend to merge together at higher levels. So the first peak is created by the wind, and in a marine environment, the wind creates noise by generating waves, and then when the waves break, they make noise. So this type of noise is in the low frequency, usually below 1 kilohertz, and it sounds like this. So hopefully this works. So I'm assuming you guys all heard it, otherwise let me know. And the intensity of this type of noise depends on the speed of the wind and changes very slowly, both in time and space. So within the same area, within a few kilometers radius, the intensity of the wind-generated noise is quite homogeneous. And then the second peak, which can only be seen partially in this graph, is created by snapping shrimps. And the specific peak frequency depends on the species of snapping shrimps, but it's usually between 2 and 10 kilohertz. And the intensity is, of course, correlated to the number of snapping shrimps, the level of activity, and also the distance. However, the snapping shrimps are very common in a lot of coastal ecosystems that are found in Eastern Australia, especially coral reefs and coffee rock reefs. So this type of noise is quite widespread. So for the anthropogenic noise, the main source is vessels. And vessel noise has a peak frequency that depends on the specific characteristics of each individual vessel, but it's mainly in the low frequencies below 400 hertz. And this is what it sounds like. So the intensity of this type of noise depends again on the characteristics of the vessel, the speed of travel of the vessel, but also the distance. So it changes very rapidly, both in space and time. And the reason why we're particularly concerned about this type of noise in relationship to cetacean vocalization is because of the increase in vessel activity, both on a global and on a local scale. So the graph at the bottom of the screen shows the number of port calls, the number of times that vessels go into port in the Great Barrier Reef region alone. And you can see how the trend is increasing. In the next few years, there is an increase predicted number of port calls in the Great Barrier Reef region, and similar trends are also expected in the Brisbane region. So there is quite a lot of concern about the possible effect of both natural and anthropogenic noise on cetacean vocalization. And in particular, I look at the effect of noise on humpback whale songs. So humpback whale songs are a series of sounds that are repeated continuously in a fixed pattern. And they've been studied extensively in the past 50 years or so, and they have their own nomenclature. So each individual sound is called a unit, and the units are stereotyped, which means that they can be classified into different unit types. So what you see here is just about 5 minutes of a typical humpback whale song. If we zoom into this session, so if we zoom into this session of the song, for some reason my presentation has stopped working. David, can you still see it?
Yes, we can see it, but it's still on the humpback whale song slide.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I don't know what happened, but we got it back. Okay, so you can see 4 different sounds in this section. So the first 2 are very similar to each other. We can call them unit type A, for example. And then the last 2 are also very similar. We can call them unit type B. And this is what they sound like. And so this specific sequence AABB is repeated a certain number of times, and then the song changes to a different sequence, in this case C, D, E, F. So this sequence is also repeated a certain number of times, and then the song changes again, and so on and so forth. So this overall song is about 10 minutes long, and when the singer gets to the end, they start singing again from the beginning. So the song is repeated in a continuous loop. Only the males are singing, the females don't produce songs, and we don't actually know what the function of the song is, but most likely they are involved in reproduction and are possibly used to mediate interactions between the singers and other males, for example, to establish dominance, or between the singers and the females in a courtship scenario. And one very interesting feature of humpback whale song is that although at any given time all the males within the same population sing very similar songs, the song changes with time. And what changes is both the characteristics of the unit types and also which unit types are present and how many times they're repeated within the song. So this is the power spectral density of a typical humpback whale song. These are received levels at about 4 kilometers from the singer. And if we compare this with the noise generated by both natural sources and vessels, you can see that the frequency range is overlapping. So this type of noise, natural noise and vessel noise, can potentially mask the song of humpback whales and reduce the communication range of the singers. So these problems, the reduction in communication range, is something that a lot of species that use sound to communicate have to deal with. And some of these species have developed some strategies to be able to cope with increasing levels of noise. So for example, if your signal is down there and the noise is in this band, one strategy is to shift the frequency of the signal side of the noise band. Another option is to increase the duration of the signal, and this gives more time to other individuals to detect it. Or we can increase the source levels of the signal. And this is something that as humans we're probably the most familiar with. When we are in a noisy environment, we tend to speak louder so that other people can still hear us. So what I was interested in for this project was to look at whether humpback whale singers use this strategy, so changes in frequency, duration, and source levels, to cope with increasing levels of noise generated by both natural and anthropogenic sources. So the data for this project were recorded on the Sunshine Coast, which is north of Brisbane and south of the Great Barrier Reef. And we use an array of 5 hydrophone buoys. So each buoy includes an hydrophone, which is suspended using a float and is anchored with a concrete block. And the hydrophone is then connected to a surface buoy that has a battery pack and an antenna. And the antenna is transmitting the sound to an onshore station. So the sounds from the 5 different buoys are combined at the onshore station, and they are recorded as a multi-channel file. And we can then measure the difference in the time of arrival of the same sound at the different buoys and estimate the location of the singer at that particular time. And if we do this throughout the song, we can then track the singer as it moves through the study area. And this is quite important because we have to deal with transmission loss. And transmission loss in our study area is frequency specific. So as the sound travels away from the singer, it gets progressively distorted. So if we know where the singer was when he produced a certain sound, we can then measure its distance from the buoy and use this distance in a transmission loss model, which is specific for our study area and is also specific for different frequency bands to correct the sound that we record at the hydrophone. So effectively, we have reconstructed the sound as it was produced by the whale. And once we reconstructed the sound, we can then reliably measure source levels and peak frequency, as well as its duration. So then to measure the natural noise, we have to make sure that there are no vessels in the area, and we do this by using some observers that are scanning the areas for boats and ships. And if we do observe a vessel in the area, we simply discard that recording. So on the remaining recordings, we measure the natural noise by selecting the intervals between consecutive whale sounds. And because we know that the natural noise is quite homogeneous across large areas, we are quite confident that the noise recorded at the hydrophone is the same noise that the whale was hearing at its location. So to assess the effect of vessel noise, instead we did a series of dedicated experiments. In these experiments, we ran a research vessel through the study area, and the vessel was tracked using the onboard GPS. And you can see the tracking red on the map. The blue track instead is a sinking whale that was in the area at the same time. So because both the whale and the vessels were moving throughout the study area, during the experiments, the received levels of the vessel at the singer were also changing all the time. So if we consider, for example, the sound, we know where the singer was when he produced a particular sound, and we can measure the received levels of vessel noise at the hydrophone by selecting the intervals between consecutive sounds immediately before the sound of interest, and then by using our transmission loss model and knowing the location of the vessel at that time, we can estimate the source levels of the vessels and then the received levels at the singer. And one important thing to keep in mind in this scenario, although the vessel noise is dominating the soundscape, the natural noise is still present. So it's at lower intensity, but it's still there. So these are some of our results. First of all, we found that the frequency, duration, and source levels, which are the features of the song that we're interested in, are quite variable between the different unit types in the song. So these graphs show the box plots for these different characteristics, and the different unit types are identified by different letters and different colors. And you can see how variable they are. So we need to take this variability into account when we then run our statistical analysis. So when we look at the effect of natural noise, we didn't find the correlations between the frequency or duration of the sounds and the natural noise levels. And you can see the regression lines are almost horizontal. However, there was a positive correlations between source levels and natural noise levels. So the whales do increase their source levels to compensate for variable levels of natural noise in the environment. And when we then tested whether they use the same strategies to compensate for vessel noise, and we did not find a correlation. So they're not changing their source levels to cope with vessel noise. However, as I mentioned before, even when the vessel noise is dominating the soundscape, the natural noise is still present. And in this case, they're still adjusting the source levels based on the underlying natural noise level. So there is still a positive correlation there. So just to conclude, the frequency and duration of the sounds were not modified when the noise changes. And what we know is that when we try to classify these sounds, the classifier, whether it's an artificial neural network or a multiple variance statistics, or if it's a cart analysis, they all use the different combination of spectral and temporal parameters to classify the sounds. So these features are probably very important to distinguish between the different unit types. And although changing these features may provide some release from masking noise, it's not worth it because it's more important to conform to the shared version of the song. However, the males did change the source levels of their songs to cope with increasing levels of natural noise. And this was quite interesting. Originally, we thought that the males were always singing as loud as they could, either to maximize the communication range or to communicate fitness to other males or to females. But instead, they adjust the source levels based on the background noise generated by natural sources. And so instead of always maximizing the communication range, what they are trying to do is to maintain a constant communication range. So then the hypothesis is that they're only interested in communicating within whales that are within a certain distance, and they don't want whales that are farther away to hear their songs. Also, we didn't find the correlations between source levels and vessel noise, and this opens up a couple of different hypotheses. So the first is that they are just unable to cope with vessel noise. And so when this type of noise increases, their songs are going to be masked, and the communication range is going to be progressively smaller and smaller. And the other hypothesis is that they're actually using other strategies. So instead of changing the characteristics of their sounds, they may be using spatial or communication masking release, which has been found in other marine mammals. So some of my colleagues are currently testing these hypotheses. So this is it for me. I'd like to acknowledge all the field teams and the volunteers that participated to the projects, the funding agency, and the traditional owners of the lands where we work. And thank you all for listening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Elisa, for your very good, very clear presentation. And so there are, I think we have, let's have a little bit of time for questions. There is a question directly to you in the chat. I don't know if you see it. It's from Giuseppa Buscaino, it's from Giusy. Nice study. How did you synchronize the buoys?
Yes, so it's quite tricky, but we got around to it by transmitting in real time. So the buoys were transmitting their signal in real time to the onshore station, and they were all recorded at the same time. So the synchronization happened as we were recording them.
Very good. And maybe if there are not any more questions, I don't see them, not even in the Q&A. So just a short comment. You have shown a slide where with possible strategies of humpback whales to cope with the noise, just shift their frequency, their songs in a frequency where there's no noise, of course, or increasing their loudness, increase their amplitude, their power. I wonder, did you find any whale or any group of whale which shifted the frequency, sorry, on the lower range of the spectrum? Because as we know, the masking effect happens for comparable frequencies, or low frequency mask the high frequencies, but high frequency do not mask the lower frequencies. So did you ever find whales that lowered their singing in order to cope with the noise?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I personally haven't. So in humpback whales, we didn't find any shift in frequency, but I do know of studies on blue whales where they found a change in the frequency of their vocalization, long-term changes, and it was a decrease. And we don't know if it's due to the noise, to the masking noise. There's been lots of hypotheses suggested to explain why they lower the frequency of their vocalizations. But one of the hypotheses is to get some release from masking noise at low frequency, especially from shipping noise.
And one last question: is the noise of the vessels that you measured going lower to the really low frequencies, like 40 hertz, like 20, 40, 60, 80, something like that, or is higher than that?
So the specific research vessel that we used, it does go down to 30 and 40 hertz, but the peak frequency is very, very distinctive of each individual vessel. And just as a rule of thumb, the smaller, faster vessels tend to have higher frequency, larger, slower vessels tend to have lower frequency, but there is a lot of variability. So when we look at vessel noise, we really need to be specific on which vessel we are looking at. Yeah. So
even whales can find space down there, depending from the vessels that travel nearby. So, absolutely. Thank you very much, Elisa, and I think we go forward with the program. Thank you so much.